Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are getting ready to get started, and we're just allowing folks to enter the room. Welcome, welcome this evening. Good evening, everyone. Just as a quick check-in, we just have a few more people who are joining and coming in the room, and we'll get started in just a moment. All right, I've been told that there's a little lull in the folks rolling into the room. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. Good evening. I am Dr. LaRonda Manigo-Bryant, Professor of African American, and Diaspora Studies, and Director of the Sonia Haynes Stone Center. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 Generate Mcneil Black History Month Lecture. You'll learn a little bit more about the lecture's history, its namesake, and our guest speaker momentarily. Typically, we'd be together in the Sonia Haynes Stone Center, where we have formally been operating as a space of academic and community engagement since 1988. Alas, the weather said otherwise, and we are gathered tonight via Zoom. I and we at the Stone Center appreciate your flexibility in joining us virtually. And I want to thank a few folks who helped to ensure that this event runs smoothly, including especially the team of the Stone Center, Sharif Dramé, who's my right hand in a lot of ways, as is Brittany Yarborough, and to our student assistants as well. This is a shameless shout out to Dr. Generate Mcneil, who is always a stalwart presence and has set such a great example for so many of us. I also want to publicly express my gratitude to the Office of the Provost and Marcus Collins, who's Associate Provost for Academic and Community Engagement, the Department of History, led by Professor Miguel Lacerna, the Department of African American, and Diaspora Studies, chaired by Professor Claude Clegg. So after my remarks, and I promise to be brief, you'll hear from Associate Provost Collins, then Professor Lacerna and Professor Clegg in that order. I also want to say hello to the members of our National Advisory Board. I see a few of you on the call, our friends, our supporters and champions far and wide. Thank you for all that you do to help us advance our work and for making the Stone Center your educational and philanthropic priority. So this lecture honors the voices that have shaped our past, the resilience that carries us forward, and the brilliance that continues to light our paths. This moment tonight is a salient and timely reminder of what we have always known, that Black history is American history. Thank you, Dr. Harold, for accepting this invitation, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to share with us tonight. In your 2020 book, When Sunday Comes, Gospel Music in the Soul and Hip Hop Eras, one of your many works I imagine that your talk will draw from tonight, you say the following, and I quote, My work examines gospel music's creative shifts, sonic innovations, theological tensions, and political assertions within the larger framework of the socioeconomic and cultural transformations taking place in post-civil rights Black America. Through an in-depth look at some of the genre's best-selling artists, my work explores gospel music's importance as an outlet for African Americans to express their spiritual, cultural, and regional identities. And it is in this spirit of Dr. Harrell's great work and that of the music that has shaped our nation that I want to invoke a hymn. When James Weldon Johnson penned the lyrics to Lift Every Voice and Sing in 1900, he was inspired by the resilience of African American communities and the ways that our collective faithfulness and hope for a future ripe with possibility would inform the pursuit of freedom for us all in this land. John Baptiste, the Grammy Award-winning former band leader for the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, has put the impact of this hymn in a most beautiful way that I want to quote here. Lifts every voice, he has said, connects us to the history of all the people who we stand on the shoulders of, who have marched and fought and died for the freedoms we enjoy and that we're trying to improve upon, end quote. It is common for us at this lecture to sing or play that hymn, but tonight I want us to reflect on its powerful poetic prose, and that especially of the first verse and refrain. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound, loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Thank you for being here with us, and I now turn it over to Dr. Marcus Collins.
Thank you, Dr. Ron. And good evening, everyone. As Dr. Ron noted, I'm the Associate Provost for Academic and Community Engagement. So it's my honor to be here tonight. And on behalf of the Office of the Provost, it's my great honor to welcome you as well to this year's Mcneil African American History Month lecture. UNC's university-wide celebration of Black History Month has been an annual tradition since 2003. Beginning in 2005, the annual Black History Month lecture has served as a cornerstone of our university's observance, and in 2023, we proudly endowed the lecture in honor of Dr. Jenna Ray Mcneil. As the first Black tenure-track professor in UNC's history department, Dr. Mcneil's scholarship and advocacy have profoundly shaped our understanding of justice, history, and the African American experience. Dr. Mcneil, your legacy continues to inspire our commitment to critical inquiry and meaningful dialogue. Tonight, we are privileged to welcome Dr. Claudrena Harold, an esteemed historian and author, whose scholarship delves into the intersections of Black liberation, gospel music, and the politics of freedom. Her lecture, Truth is on the Way, promises to be a powerful exploration of how Black sacred music has served as both a reflection of and a force for social change. As we celebrate this evening, let us also acknowledge the long history of Black achievement and resilience at Carolina, from the first Black students who enrolled in 1951 to the continued strides in Africana Studies, where we expect our first cohort of students this fall in 2025. Our commitment to truth, progress, justice is unwavering, and events like this lecture reinforce the importance of learning from the past to build a better future. In closing, I want to offer my sincere thanks to partners in the Department of African American, and Diaspora Studies, led by Dr. Claude Clegg, and the Department of History, led by Dr. Miguel Lacerna, for their consistent guidance and support of our university-wide Black History Month observance, and a hearty acknowledgement of the phenomenal team of the Sonia Haynes Stone Center, led by Dr. Ron Manigault Bryant. And to all of you joining us tonight, Thank you for being part of this important conversation. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Lacerna.
Thank you so much. I just want to say my name is Miguel Lacerna. I'm the department chair in the Department of History. And it's my honor and privilege to be able to give you a little bit more background about the person for whom this lecture series is named after, Jenna Ray Mcneil. Jenna Ray Mcneil is a professor emerita of history at the University of North Carolina, where she worked for over 30 years and recently retired. She's a distinguished scholar specializing in African American and U.S. constitutional history. She's renowned for her monograph groundwork, Charles Hamilton Houston and the Struggle for Civil Rights, which earned the American Bar Association's Civil Gavel Award. And she's also held significant roles at Howard University. In 2022, she also held, she received the Charles Hamilton Houston Medallion of Merit. And the next year, in 2023, she received the William Richardson Davey Award from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. A Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Kalamazoo College, she completed her PhD in history at the University of Chicago under the guidance of John Hope Franklin. And so in recognition of her outstanding contributions, the Black History Month lecture was endowed and named in Dr. Jenna Ray Mcneil's honor beginning in 2023. I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Mcneil. I consider her an esteemed colleague and a dear friend. She's somebody who's been an advocate of really all faculty and being treated with dignity and respect, even down to when I got tenure. I remember she gave me a very nice card with a Moe's gift certificate, because years before that, I had told her that Moe's was my family's favorite place to eat when my kids were little. And she remembered that, which I think just kind of goes to show who she is as a person, really caring and thinking about the entire person, no matter what her role is. And so we're really glad to say that this lecture series stands as a testament to her enduring impact in the fields of history and civil rights. And now with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Claude Clegg, Chair of AAAD.
Thank you, Professor Lacerna. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out, at least virtually coming out to this evening's program. I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming and introducing our speaker. Dr. Claudrena is the Edward Stettinius Professor of History and the Associate Dean for the Social Sciences at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. She specializes in African American history, African American studies, and U.S. labor history. And she has taught courses with such titles as From Motown to Hip Hop, The Evolution of African American Music, The Sounds of Blackness, Black Power, and Black Fire, The Struggle for Social Justice and Racial Equality at the University of Virginia. Moreover, Professor Harrell is the author of 3 books: The Rise and Fall of The Rise and Fall of the Garvey Movement in the Urban South, 1918 to 1942. That was her first book. New Negro Politics in the Jim Crow South. And When Sunday Comes, Gospel Music in the Soul and Hip Hop Eras. She has co-edited 2 volumes as well: The Punitive Turn, New Approaches to Race and Incarceration, and Charlottesville 2017, The Legacy of Race and Inequity. As a part of her ongoing work on the history of African American life at the University of Virginia, Professor Harrell has written, produced, and co-edited with Kevin Everson 13 short films. These films have been screened at the National Gallery of Art, Whitney Museum, the Berlin International Film Festival, the London Film Festival, the Black Star Film Festival, New York Film Festival, and other venues across the world. Professor Harrell's talk this evening is entitled Truth is on the Way: Gospel Music, Black Liberation, and the Politics of Freedom in the Soul and Hip Hop Era. In his pioneering work, Somebody's Calling My Name, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker famously wrote, "What Black people are singing religiously will provide a clue as to what is happening to them sociologically." With Dr. Walker's provocative assertion in mind and Nikki Giovanni's 1971 groundbreaking recording, Truth is on the Way, as inspiration, Professor Harrell's lecture traces the political evolution of gospel music over the past 50 years, concluding with a discussion of the importance of Black sacred music as a critical source and driver of contemporary Black experimentation and innovation. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Professor Claudrena Harrell.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm introduction and the opportunity to be in fellowship with this wonderful community. Over the past few weeks, I have had the sheer fortune to engage in deep reflection on the magnificent work of Dr. Mcneil and her immense contributions to U.S. legal and constitutional history, African American history, civil rights studies, Black studies, and theological education. Part of that reflection has involved revisiting her many books and articles, particularly her work on the African American church and the social justice concerns of Black faith leaders. To engage Dr. Mcneil's scholarly example in these trying times is both a necessity and a gift. That gift was most lucid for me in the early 2000s, while reading The Courage to Hope: From Black Suffering to Human Redemption, Essays in Honor of James Melvin Washington. That edited volume included Mcneil's essay, Waymaking and Dimensions of Responsibility, an African American Perspective on Salvation. In that article, Dr. Mcneil embraced a central theme in African American history: the intersection of faith, hope, and the collective quest for freedom in the here and now. To be saved, she noted, is to have engaged in dissent and resistance. Having salvation is to transpose terrors, absurdities, angst, depression, and all manner of external and mental demons into a new harmonious song. In ways both subtle and direct, Mcneil's Waymaking article planted seeds that blossomed in later years as my research turned gradually and reluctantly to the musical world of the Black church. With the provocations of Dr. Mcneil in mind and the radiant gospel truths of Nikki Giovanni and Bernice Johnson Reagan in spirit, I want to meditate on the political evolution of gospel music over the past 50 years. I want us to collectively consider how a select group of gospel musicians responded to the political challenges of their times and advanced the theology of human liberation, grounded in Christian texts and ethics. Tonight, I position gospel music as a critical site for complex and oftentimes contradictory conversations and debates on race, economics, class, war, sexuality, politics, and interracial fellowship within the body of Christ. Tonight, I'd also like to bring into sharper focus the liberatory opportunities found and lost in the world of gospel music. I want us to return once again to Wyatt T. Walker and reflect on that assertion: what Black people are singing religiously will provide a clue as to what is happening to them sociologically. If Walker's assertion holds true, then how does a focus on the sorrow songs, gospel music, the sacred blues, expand our understanding of the religious, political, and imaginative worlds of Black people? How does the institution building efforts and endeavors, the sonic interventions, and the theological propagations of gospel singers reflect larger political realities in Black America, the nation, and the world. What might we learn from an engagement with the praise and worship melodies of Andre Crouch or his heir, C.C. Winans? What might we learn from the revolutionary sounds of the Clark sisters, the exquisite arrangements of Richard Smallwood and Donald Lawrence, or even the music and the politics of UNC's own gospel choir, part of that glorious wave of gospel choirs formed in the 1970s at colleges and universities across the nation? And if our exploration of Black sacred music extends into the secular world, how do we understand the gospel excursions of Black cultural producers ranging from Beyonce to visual artist Arthur Jafa? What do they tell us about the centrality of gospel music in shaping Black subjectivity and modern social life? To set the stage for our collective journey through the politics of gospel music, I want to begin in one of gospel's epicenters, Detroit, Michigan. On the morning of June the 28th, 1990, South African freedom fighters Nelson and Winnie Mandela traveled to Detroit as part of their 10-day tour of the United States. Later that night, a jubilant crowd of 50,000 assembled in Tiger Stadium to celebrate the anti-apartheid revolutionary, whose protracted struggle for a free South Africa had inspired millions. As he had done throughout his tour, Nelson Mandela expressed gratitude to those who had participated in the global struggle against apartheid. In the face of your own problems and difficulties, you have not forgotten us. Looking optimistically toward the future, Nelson Mandela promised, freedom is coming to us. Victory is in sight. Mandela was the night star attraction, but the event featured other luminaries, including several musicians closely identified with the Motor City. Stevie Wonder, the gospel quartet, the Winans, and the Queen, Aretha Franklin. While several songs in Aretha Franklin's extensive catalog suited the historic occasion, she opted for the gospel classic, Surely God is Able. In her abridged rendition, Aretha Franklin mesmerized the crowd with vivid images of God as liberator, as comforter, as waymaker. Twice during her performance, she assured Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela of God's readiness to intervene in the days ahead. Aretha's Amazing Grace. Tempting as it might be to talk about Franklin's genius, her politics in isolation, She has to be understood. Her politics has to be understood within the context of community. Detroit, Memphis, birthplace of William Herbert Brewster's Surely God is Able. By the time Franklin recorded Surely God is Able for her 1987 album, One God, One Faith, One Baptism, the song had been on the gospel highway for nearly 40 years. The poetics and politics of Aretha has to be understood within the context of community and also within the context of time, particularly when we think about her 1972 classic, Amazing Grace. That particular album, from its visuals to its sonnets, cannot be understood outside of the context of the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, the Black liberation struggle. As many of you know, within the popular music world, the 1960s and the 1970s was a period of significant change. As the tone of Black politics became more strident and openly defiant, as Craig Watkins rightly notes, the demeanor of Black expressive culture developed more explicitly political features. Gospel music was no exception. It was about being political. Benny Diggs, a founding member of the groundbreaking New York Community Choir, told gospel historian Tim Dillinger. It was about being anti-anything that was status quo. We didn't just want to be the norm, we wanted to be that which would be in another realm. It was about freedom. Why not join in with freedom? For Diggs and many other gospel artists, it was impossible to escape the gravitational force of the Black cultural awakening of the 1960s and the 1970s. The world was in the throes of revolutionary change, and several artists sought to create art reflective and responsive to those changes. That commitment was reflective in the institutional endeavors of James Cleveland, who in the mid-1970s set his sights on Soul City in North Carolina to create his dream of a gospel college. That commitment, that vision, of course, was also evident in the groundbreaking, transformative gospel blues of Pastor Shirley Caesar. A native of Durham, North Carolina, who rose to national prominence as a member of the legendary gospel group, the Caravans, Shirley Caesar occupies a unique place in my heart, but also a unique place in the history of gospel music. As a brilliant storyteller deeply rooted in the Black sermonic tradition, and a timeless artist who can thrive in a variety of musical idioms. Traditional, contemporary gospel, soul, country, funk, disco, you name it, she can do it. Through defiant characters like Shouting John and the Praying Slave Lady, she served as a mouthpiece for the marginalized, for the dispossessed, and the misunderstood. With more consistency than any gospel artist of her generation, Shirley Caesar tackled the pressing issues of the day: racism, poverty, the war in Southeast Asia, the urban crisis, the growing class stratification within Black America, and its adverse effects on family dynamics and community relations. On songs like How Long Has It Been Since You've Been Home and Don't Throw Your Mama Away, she cautioned her listeners, she cautioned the world against discarding those familial and community relationships that provide spiritual and cultural grounding. What Caesar modeled for her gospel peers was a socially engaged artist, unwavering in her commitment to sharing the gospel, while crafting narratives rooted in the history and lived experiences of her people. Thanks to the pioneering work of folks at UNC, we know so much more about the early life of Shirley Caesar and also her parents who were tobacco workers. In fact, an interview of her mother, Hallie Caesar, can be found in the library of UNC. And if you really want to understand Shirley Caesar's politics, which are evident and surface not just in her music, but also in her civic activities, particularly when she served on the Durham City Council, all of that is at UNC. It would have been impossible for me to do my work on Shirley Caesar without the resources of UNC. Shirley Caesar is so critical in terms of thinking about the political possibilities of gospel music. Equally important is another artist who is critical to understanding the evolution, the political evolution of gospel music in the 1970s, and that is the gospel legend Rance Allen, a native of Monroe, Michigan, whose majestic voice in so many ways revolutionized gospel singing. Together with his brothers Steve and Tom, Rance Allen formed the Rance Allen Group, which had its big break in 1971 when they signed with Stax Records imprint Gospel Truth. That this revolutionary group would emerge, or I should say their recordings would emerge from the Bluff City, should not come as a surprise. Though frequently overshadowed by Chicago and Detroit, Memphis holds a distinctive place in gospel music history, the site of some of the genre's most cutting-edge developments. Imagine, if you will, the evolution of the gospel sound without the prolific composers William Herbert Brewster and Lucy Campbell, the sonic influence of Mason Temple, the groundbreaking Stax recordings of the Staple Singers, the R&B drenched rhythms of Orlando Draper and the Associates, or the hardly invisible hand of WDIA as a national tastemaker in the gospel field. Just think how central the sacred melodies of Memphis songwriters, Move On Up a Little Higher, Surely God Is Able, How I Got Over, and I'll Take You There, have been to the gospel canon. Rance Allen's music is very much a part of this Memphis story, but also very much a part of this story of the politicization of gospel music. 6 months after signing with Stax Records, label, or I should say imprint, the Gospel Truth, Rance Allen performed at the historic Watts Summer Festival, held in Los Angeles on August the 20th. The 7-hour event drew a crowd of more than 100,000. On the song Lying on the Truth, the brothers' infectious energy matched the mood of the day.
You've been lying on the truth. I'm gonna tell it like it is. You've been lying on the truth, yeah. I'm gonna tell it like it is, yeah. You say, Alexander, found the communication. Oh, black's been sending your messages for many generations, yeah. Say, Columbus, yeah. Discovered our land. Hey, when Columbus got off of the ship, black man welcomed his hand. Don't you
what we hear in the music of Rance Allen, particularly his recordings with Stax Records, is a melding of spiritual concerns with political ones. And perhaps on no album was that melding more intense, that fusion more intense than his 1975 album, The Soulful Experience, one of my favorite albums in gospel music history. On songs like Ain't No Need to Worry, Allen embraces the fragility and the uncertainty of human existence. The unpredictable cycle of life brings joy and pain, pleasure and heartache. The key was to find the beauty in the everyday, or what writer Ernest Harding calls the grace in the grind. That soulful experience refuses to respond to the social malaise of the 1970s with theological certainty was refreshing. Equally refreshing is the record's refusal to ignore the political crises gripping the country, or attribute these crises to the nation's growing secularism. On songs like Talk That Talk and Harlem Heaven, the Rance Allen Group confronts the entrenched racism within the nation, but also within the body of Christ, the growing class stratification within Black America, and the political elite's disregard for the poor. Thanks in large part to their affiliation with Stax Records and their partnership with David Porter, the Rance Allen Group had the freedom to push against what many within the Christian music industry deemed acceptable for gospel musicians, or unacceptable, for gospel musicians. In doing so, they allowed listeners to consider how the gospel sound might be reimagined for the late 20th century. But there remained a question: could the art form gospel contain an expansive political vision? Was God's word enough for the unique challenges of the post-civil rights, post-segregation, post-colonial, postmodern world? Could and should gospel music provide more than Christian-based theological reflections? These questions motivated my uncle David Crawford, who would use his gospel work with the legendary Mighty Clouds of Joy to push the boundaries of gospel music, to create an album, to create 2 albums that would explore the politics of religion, race, class, and even sexuality. Formed in Los Angeles during the late 1950s, the Mighty Clouds of Joy quickly established themselves as gospel's premier quartet. In the early 1970s, the Mighty Clouds came under the control of the secular label ABC after the company acquired Duke Peacock Records. Feeling as if the quartet had crossover potential, ABC paired them with Dave Crawford, my uncle, a talented producer whose compositions included What a Man, Young Hearts Run Free, I Like to Live the Life That I Sing About, and my favorite, Don't Knock the Love. As he had recently done with Wilson Pickett and B.B. King, Crawford recorded the group's first record, Time, in Philadelphia's Sigma Studio. Released in 1974, a pivotal moment in history when the nation's economy and its soul bottomed out, Time absorbed and emanated the tensions and contradictions of the early 1970s. Over disco beats, swirling strings, and punchy horn lines, the Mighty Clouds covered a wide range of topics: God's grace, the economic crisis and inflation, and the tragic comic reality of life. With their success on the R&B and disco charts, the Mighty Clouds became the first gospel group to appear on Don Cornelius' popular dance show, Soul Train. The group's upward trend continued with their follow-up release, Kicking. Much of the album's buzz centered around the hit Mighty High, a disco jam that held the #1 position on Billboard's dance charts for more than a month in 1976. Within weeks, Mighty High became a fan favorite at the nation's most popular discos, including New York City's 12 West, Infinity, and Leviticus. Equally impressive was a song that I want to play right now entitled Everything is Love, a song powered by a hard disco swing, lush string dominated orchestration, and soulful vocals. The song's lyrical content was revolutionary. Lyrics such as "Love can come to us in many ways" reflected the fluid racial and gender boundaries within the disco world and the church world.
Everything is love. Everything is love. Everything is love. Everything is love. It comes from up above. Everything is love. The peace of love. Everything is love. Everybody's got his own way. He can't live by what others say. He's got to face reality by himself. Like Dr. Pickens starts, doesn't deal in what is not. Love is about the only real thing left in the world.
Kicking brought the Mighty Clouds of Joy, and that is not the Mighty Clouds of Joy, that is Commission. Kicking brought the Mighty Clouds of Joy new fans while igniting great debate within the gospel community about the art form's direction. At the 1978 convention of the Gospel Music Workshop, the legendary Detroit radio announcer Martha the Queen Steinberg called for greater experimentation in gospel. We got to quit playing God. He's constant energy. If he wasn't, we would have stopped at the Old Testament. Gospel legend Andre Crouch agreed. We haven't tapped all the possibilities. But I ask, what were those possibilities? Were they the praise and worship songs that made Crouch a star in the Jesus movement? Were they the transgressive lyrics found in the Mighty Clouds of Joy? As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, new and established artists responded to these questions and challenges. Taking the lead on this front were gospel groups, many gospel groups emerging out of Detroit, committed to creating a new aesthetic that defied easy categorization. Though speaking to the nation, these groups' political sensibilities grew within the crucible of post-industrial Detroit. Ground zero for the urban crisis, the Motor City struggled under the weight of urban divestment, a declining tax base, deindustrialization, neoliberal policies, and an expanding carceral state. None of these realities escaped the notice of groups like the Clark Sisters and the Winans and Commission, who viewed Detroit's problems as both structural and existential in nature. And yet there was complexity in the music. On studio recordings like the Clark Sisters Sincerely, Commission's Go Tell Somebody, and the Winans Tomorrow, strong critiques of structural racism existed alongside conservative narratives, attributing society's purported decline to the breakdown of the nuclear family. Perhaps few albums reflect the complicated, messy nature of urban contemporary gospel music in the 1980s and the 1990s more than the Winans' 1990 release, Return. One of the best-selling records in gospel music history, a record that bridged the sonic worlds of gospel, R&B, and New Jack Swing. On the Teddy Riley produced It's Time and Don't Leave Me, apocalyptic themes of social disorder, divine judgment, and imminent world destruction blended perfectly with the jagged edges of Teddy Riley's New Jack Swing. Listen closely to Marvin Winans' impassioned vocals And you'll hear a deep thinker wrestling with what Marty Martin calls the paradoxes and puzzlements of theodicy. Such wrestling reflected the political and the social context in which Return was produced. Looking at the challenges ahead, the Winans put no punches. The state of the world mandated a radical reordering of society, a return to the best of our traditions, and a reimagining of what a beloved community might look like in the future. Even as the nation and the national media bemoaned the tragedy of Detroit, many Motor City residents envisioned the 1990s as a decade of rebirth for the city. And so of the many messages to be gleaned from the music, one rings loud and clear. The suturing and healing of our fractured world demands care for and connection to one another. And that collective care must extend beyond the walls of the church. That message remained a central concern in the music of several gospel stars during the 1990s and the 2000s, including Kirk Franklin. Franklin, of course, revolutionized the genre with his innovative compositions and arrangements, his dynamic performances, and his record-breaking sales. And unlike so many in the gospel industry, enamored and committed to what scholar Corey Hunter identifies as a theology of racial ethnic oneness, Franklin was and remains committed to speaking openly and honestly also about the pervasiveness of white supremacy, not just in US politics, but once again also within the Christian community. Committed to speaking to his audience's spiritual, social, and material concerns, he has put forth an expansive vision of gospel music's possibilities that on many occasions embraces the totality of the human experience. That commitment is evident on songs like Strong God, Losing My Religion, and Revolution. There is, within the music of Kirk Franklin, a wrestling with the state of the church in its present state. And that wrestling entails grappling with the state of gospel music. And for me, the question is and remains simple. Is the art form politically and spiritually equipped to meet the challenges of the contemporary moment? All of this leads me to a bigger question. What is the political future of gospel music? The answer to this question has emerged not just within the gospel field, but also beyond. Because gospel matters. Indeed, within the world of popular music, several of the biggest and most celebrated artists sample liberally from gospel songs and identify gospel musicians as major influences. Across the Black popular music world, there's widespread recognition of gospel music as a source of sonic and visual innovation. That recognition has also extended into the art world. Consider as a case in point Arthur Jafa's Dreams Are Colder Than Death, Colleen Smith's In the Wake exhibition for the Whitney Museum, Theaster Gates' Young Lords and Their Traces survey at the New Museum in New York, and Jatavia Gary's I Know It Was the Blood installation at Dallas's New Museum. Each of these brilliant artists in their own distinctive fashion cull from various sources associated with the rituals and the practices of Black religion, particularly Afro-Protestantism. Jatavia Gary transgressively remixes the secular and the sacred across various multimedia artworks. Her sculptural installation, Precious Memories, recreates the living room of her childhood home. The installation consists of a well-worn recliner positioned across 3 stacked televisions. The sounds of Ricky Dillard and New Generation emanate from one of the televisions, a brilliant testament to the wonder-working power of the blood, ancestral and divine. It requires no great leap of the imagination to see the influence of the Black church and gospel music on Gary's creative practice. or to ascribe religious meaning to the composition and objects in her breathtakingly beautiful and politically powerful work. And then there's AJ. Over the past decade, Arthur Jafa has created an impressive body of work that has enriched our understanding of the Black sacred tradition, beautifully rendered through cinema, the sonic and visual manifestations of what Braxton Shelley calls the Black gospel imagination. He's also underscored the centrality of gospel music as a critical source of contemporary Black experimentation. In ways both subtle and direct, these artists invite us to consider a different use of Black church aesthetics and the gospel imagination. And that's what I've attempted to do in a new experimental film on Walter Hawkins and Sylvester. Over the course of his storied career, Walter Hawkins composed songs that remain central to the Black experience in the United States. And like some of his peers, he also attempted to deal with the issues facing African Americans in major cities: deindustrialization, unemployment, poverty, drugs, and violence. He also addressed the AIDS epidemic, which had a devastating impact on thousands of Oakland and San Francisco residents, including some who attended Hawkins Church. In 1988, he eulogized one of his members, the disco legend Sylvester. Tragedy is not a punishment from God. The popular gospel singer told thousands of mourners at the funeral of disco legend Sylvester in 1988. AIDS is not God's punishment. With these words, Walter Hawkins sought to move the Black church away from a theology of AIDS as a punishment from God to one that emphasized the sacredness of all human life. In this experimental film that will conclude the lecture, and I'll just show you a snippet of it, this experimental film recreates Hawkins' eulogy of Sylvester by drawing on the spirit of inclusivity that undergirded the singer's theology and his art. And in doing so, it represents my attempt, along with my colleague, Kevin Everson, our attempt to celebrate both the Black sermonic tradition and the gospel imagination. And so I'm gonna end by showing you just a brief snippet of this work in progress. And I'll open everything up for questions.
Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Under the shadow of your throne, our saints have dwelt secure. Sufficient is your arm alone, and our defense is sure. Time, like an ever-rolling stream, soon bears us all away. If Sylvester was here, he would not want us to be quiet. This I know. He would want us here at Love Center, his home church, to celebrate his life, celebrate the goodness of God, and celebrate our deep connection to one another. Please know that I share your pain, for Sylvester was a dear friend. It was a joy to know him, to experience his deep faith, and be enveloped in his love and friendship. Without question, something vast and noble has passed before us. Sylvester. Dooney. Sylvester! Beloved son of Letha Weaver. As I prepared for today, memories flooded my mind. one in particular stood out. A few years back, Sylvester was scheduled to perform at Trocadero Transfer, and I decided to join him. We traveled on his moped. Yes, his moped. It was such an exhilarating experience, both the ride and the show at Trocadero. Sylvester was electric, and the scene was deeply spiritual. Trocadero was his sanctuary, and the audience, his fans, they were his congregation.
I'm going to stop right there. Thank you so much for your patience and your time, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harold. I mean, I have, as we would say, 50-11 questions, but I also want to open the floor to our audience here. We have a good number of folks here, and I'd love to hear from you all. I would just encourage you, because it's a webinar format, to please insert your questions in the chat. I see that one is here that I want to start with. I don't know if you can see it, which is someone in the audience wanted to know whether or not you had any co-production role on with Henry Louis Gates's series on gospel music. And if you did or did not, it'd probably be helpful to get a sense of what your take on that series is as well.
Yeah, so thank you, and I'm sorry about the slide. I didn't expand it. I hope you all could see some of it.
Yeah, we could see it, and I didn't realize either. My apologies to folks in the webinar land for noticing. I was just listening also, so
Okay, sorry about that. I
Yeah.
knew there was one point where I didn't see me either anymore, so I was like, uh-oh, I hope they can see me. I hope they can hear me.
Yeah.
And that is like, that was a faith moment. No, I did not, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. I did not co-produce that documentary or that series. I just was a participant. And no, so I didn't, co-produce it. I wasn't involved in it. They did ask me about, the history, and I was interviewed, and I'm happy that it came out. I think it's all about form, and we all have different styles and different forms. I don't, in terms of filmmaking, I don't necessarily do those kind of films in terms of documenting stuff, but I think it's incredibly important. So it was interesting. I think it is difficult, even if you have 4 sections in a series, to capture the evolution of gospel music from the beginning to the present, from the golden age to the platinum age, within that form and within that construct. So I thought that it was very useful. I thought it was a great starting point. It's interesting because there are some more experimental things that I think are happening now that I really like and that I really appreciate. I think you can always look at a documentary and say, well, wow, they should have focused more on this or more on that. It's really difficult. I think in a lot of ways, and I try to challenge this in some ways with the book, I think we can also get caught up in this kind of golden age moment of the 30s and the 40s. And so by the time we get to the 80s, we're like speeding through, 40 years of history. I think also sometimes gospel music, the story of gospel music can be told from an outsider perspective, from a roots perspective. So you spend half of the time trying to prove its genius, half of the time trying to prove its connection to other musical art forms, when I just, you know, that's not necessary. So I think it was very interesting, and I look forward to other things that maybe explore like the later periods. I mean, and also where we include, and I think you got that with some people, but where you really also include the folks who kind of politically and spiritually matured in the 80s and the 90s, and who will talk about a group with like Commission with the same passion that they'll talk about Jodeci and Boyz II Men.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was useful, and I hope that we see more films like that, and not just within the documentary genre. But thanks for the question.
There are a few other questions in the chat, and I want to help you just kind of streamline them. You don't have to worry about it. I got you, Dr. Harold. So I'll
appreciate it.
Yes, of course. There's a question about geography, about Durham specifically, but I want to pause. I'll come back to your question, Haley, I promise. But Dr. Agby Davies is in the room, and she asked a great question I think is relevant, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your decision to experiment with short film, right? You do a lot with genre bending, moving, and you talked about the music certainly in that form as well. And someone is also asking about what genre you feel like, you know, kind of best speaks of Black liberation. So there's a question about the genre of film, and then there's also the question about what genre of music you feel like speaks most readily to Black liberation.
Yeah, thanks. So as I was telling Dr. Rohn earlier today, you know, I feel like in many ways I'm a scholar in search of form, and you know, my maturation as a scholar really was Black studies at Temple University, and so I just consider history as like my hammer and my tool. But I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to tell complex stories of really the formation of Black studies here at the University of Virginia. And I started working on the history of Black studies at UVA and the early African American experience. And I wanted to know, how would the unfolding of that story look on 16 millimeter, on real film? You know, I believe that film provides you with the opportunity to demonstrate a level of human intimacy and touch. There's a materiality aspect of the film that you don't get, that I can't do with books. And so experimental film became a way for me to also tell these stories in snapshots, not definitive summaries. I think sometimes we get caught up when we write books. So even when we make documentaries, we try to make, and Kevin Everson, my colleague, he always talks about this, we try to make 10 films with one film. And so the form of the short film form enables me to articulate a particular aspect of history. I'll give you one example. I have one film that's just basically on when Sly Stone came to Charlottesville. And it just focuses on him getting off the airplane. Because if you know anything about Sly Stone, you know that everything is interesting. And one of the things that's interesting about this, he came to UVA in 1973, right after he had recorded his album Fresh. And there was just so much about it. But the thing that was crazy about his arrival is that the university, while they're trying to deal with, you know, these new African students coming in, they pay for, you know, Sly, but they don't actually have anybody to go pick him up from the airport.
Wow.
So when the Black alums told me that story of like, we heard Sly was at the, you know, and there's so many aspects of that story, I was like, wow, I want to make a film on a group of students going to pick Sly up from the airport. You know, I did not necessarily, in 1973, after, you know, there's a riot going on, had been out for 2 years. So I like that particular form. I heard that story of Walter Hawkins talking about going to a popular spot with Sylvester on a motorcycle. And so that just fascinated me. The sermon, the eulogy, AIDS is not God's punishment. You know, I only have aspects of that. So also what you'll hear, if you see the whole thing, is actually me trying to engage in homiletics. And I went and listened to different eulogies of that period. And then I heard Yvette Flunder talk about that moment, what it was like to be in San Francisco and Oakland in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And then I looked at the scriptures. And so then I put that together, and so film really, Kevin and I put that together. It works. And and this question of genre, what genre, this question, what contains, is it, what contains spirit? Is it John Coltrane? Is it Thelonious Monk? I'm staying with New York, North Carolina. Is it Shirley Caesar? Like, what contains spirit? I think if we think about the 1960s and the 1970s, one of the interesting things that emerges as a result of the Black arts movement is this idea that these various genres can come together and create a new understanding of spirit. That's what you hear when you listen to Nikki Giovanni's Truth Is on the Way, 1971, and she's doing the poetry, and then you hear the New York Community Choir. That's what Donny Hathaway is doing. That's what Aretha is doing. That's what Cannonball Adderley, Mercy, Mercy Me is doing. How can we convey spirit through form? And so what's the form? What's the container? And so that's what Donald Byrd is doing. So I would say in certain moments, it's not just one genre. We're trying to come up with something that's distinct. That is the work in some ways of Black studies. That's Archie Shepp. That's what folks are, I think that's what folks are trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to capture spirit. At the end of the day, I'm trying to capture spirit in its secular and religious forms. It's like you're trying to capture Michael Jordan at halftime with the flu, and do just like, it's like, how do you capture that moment? How do you go in a zone?
One of the, you're really talking about giving language in some ways to that which is ineffable, right? Which, for me as a scholar of religious studies, I understand exactly what you're doing, and I can appreciate the challenge, of that effort too. I just want to segue to Darlena's question in the chat, which is also connected. I promise, Haley, I'm coming back to your question. Don't worry. And it is, are there political implications for other genres of music to cross into or to be covered by gospel acts or gospel choirs, right? So New Jersey Mass Choir, I Want to Know What Love Is, Bette Midler, Wind Beneath My Wings, songs like those. Darlene wants to know, are there political implications for that kind of crossover?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think there are political implications. They are very intentional. I think it is very intentional when you get that with, New Jersey Mass, I Want to Know What Love Is. I think it's very intentional. It's intentional with Beyonce. The expansive spirituality that's conveyed through her body of work, intensely political, but not just one way. Because then there's Kanye. No, I'm just saying that is, you have to think about the ways in which gospel music is functioning for him.
Yeah.
And that embrace of gospel music, or the ways in which we evoke the gospel choir in certain moments. You can't run from that. That's a part of it. That's a part of it, right? And it supposedly adds a certain level of legitimacy. And that's why the Love Is the Message is Death with Arthur Jafa is so interesting, because he uses Kanye's ultralight beam and he puts it on top of these images that range from Obama singing Amazing Grace to, images of King. What is it doing? One of the interesting things that happens within the context of that video is it adds another layer to the sound, but yeah, the sound is there. It's not just one way. That's a great question. The politics of it. It's not just one way. It's never been one way. And it's messy and it's complicated. And so it's very, to me, intentional. I'm always interested in the ways in which gospel music invades certain space, the ways in which the choir as symbol invades certain space, you know. And
Yeah.
it usually occurs too sometimes in a national moment when the nation is trying to come to grips with what it is and what it isn't.
Hmm. One of the other questions, and this is related to Haley's question. See, I promised you, Haley, I was going to come back to it. You move, you know, just kind of throughout the nation geographically, right?
Mhm.
Detroit to Durham. Haley's question is, would you say that Durham is a cultural hub for gospel music?
Oh, most definitely. Durham, I mean, it's just born in North Carolina, outside the county line. I heard at an early age that Jesus was a friend of mine. 15 child out of 16 children. Come on, John P. Key, because you're trying to challenge this the industrial thing. Both mama and daddy was there. I learned at an early age that Jesus really cared. It will be all right. Man, what Durham gives you sonically is the result of Durham being like located geographically in this kind of liminal space of urban and rural. And so no doubt about it, you know, Durham gives you Shirley Caesar and John P. Key. It's a particular sound that is unique. It's urban, but it's country too. It's very similar in some ways to what you get with like Al Green's Memphis sound. So no, Durham is critical. And the sound is unique. It's not Charlotte, you know, it is something that's unique. And I did that with John P. Key because he's a central figure. John P. Key is the bridge in a lot of ways from the Hawkins and the Winans to Kirk Franklin. And John P. Key, it is hard to communicate how popular he was in the 80s and in the 90s and what that music meant, how he in many ways kind of that choir sound and how he brought that and he kind of reaffirmed that choir sound in a contemporary moment. And yet still it was funky. And it was something unique about, you know, it came from Durham. So when you listen to the music, it's like really country. But it's something else. But he's also narratively, when I said I was born in Durham, North Carolina, outside the county line.
Outside the county line. Yeah.
Yeah, outside the county line. He's also trying to, once again, when I was talking about deindustrialization, and we love to talk about like hip hop as the CNN of Black America. You know, first of all, there are a lot of other genres out there, but also like Black people live in a lot of different places and in a lot of different geographical settings. And so what I really appreciated about John P. Key, but you also get it with Shirley Caesar, Shouting John. You know, John, in a moment where Black people are losing all this land, Shouting John owns all this land. You know, we laugh and, you know, beans, potatoes, and, you know, you name it, but like he owns his own land. Oh, my mule. They come out here, you know, class politics, all of these things are being captured, I think, in the music of folks from Durham. So yes, I stand on that one. Very important, you know, and so yeah, I do believe strongly in the power of geography. I do.
There's a question from Kamari Peed, who is a student from North Carolina Central, and who would like to know, and talking a little more locally, even though you're at at the University of Virginia. And this is also just a shameless shout out to Dr. Mcneil, who is also on the call. Hey, Dr. Mcneil. Kamari is a student at NCCU and wants to know how you feel being asked to speak at this event specifically. Do you feel a connection with those artists in particular that you spoke about today? I mean, you talk about your uncle as being a part of that, but are there others that you feel a kind of connection to?
Oh, definitely, and welcome, and thanks for being from North Carolina Central. I have a film called Hampton that was inspired by a story that I had with the great late Deborah Saunders White, who was the chancellor at North Carolina Central, who passed away a few years ago. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I say that because she told the story, and I'm sorry, and I don't want to be long-winded, but she told the story of being a student at the University of Virginia in the 1970s and having this transformative moment and finally feeling like she belonged when the university let the gospel choir borrow a bus to go have a concert, give a concert in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And so I'm so happy to see somebody from North Carolina Central. And then, of course, when you think about the centrality of that university in terms of jazz, when you think about hip hop and when you think about the people who came out of Central, including folks like Ninth Wonder, et cetera.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel a deep connection to the people that I write about. And perhaps one could make the argument scholarly is too much of a deep connection. It's too much of a connection. I think at times in the book, I probably sound like just a straight up fan. And it was a book that I wanted to bear witness and give praise to people that I care for deeply. There is nobody in that book, and my book is organized around biographies, and it moves from James Cleveland to Andre Crouch, to Shirley Caesar, to Al Green, to the Sounds of Blackness, Tate Sitz, the Winans, BB and CC Winans, my favorite, one of my favorites, Vanessa Bell Armstrong, John P. Key, Kurt Franklin, Yolanda Adams. Yeah, there's nobody, Shirley Caesar, of course, that I don't feel deeply about. And it is music that had a profound impact on who I am, even when I don't like some of the messages. I was telling, Dr. Ron and I were talking earlier about, how you kind of politically and you spiritually mature, but yet certain things still stay with you. There's a way in which the voice of Marvin Winans will always mean something to me. There's a way in which the lyrics of BB, I was talking about when our 3 students were murdered in 2022, and CeCe Winans came here and she performed The Goodness of God. And I really struggled with that song. And I was thinking it has so much theological certainty in a moment I just didn't feel certain. But then I could lean on, BB and the song In the Meantime, where he says, I don't know why, but I know I'll make it over. I don't know when, but he said he'll bring me through. Not yet there, And so, no, this music means a lot to me. And I am serious. It means different things at different times. And you evolve. It doesn't, I struggled with The Goodness of God in 2022. I don't struggle with it as much anymore in 2025. And that is a beautiful thing. I didn't appreciate always the genius of my uncle when I was a kid, and all I wanted to listen to was, Run DMC or Michael Jackson or the Winans or Whitney Houston. But there are things now, Everything is Love, and I listen to it and I say, wow, man, that's a bold song, And so, yeah, deep love. This is real.
Yeah. There's a lot of ego pride going in the chat right now. Just I want you to know there are folks that say ego pride amplified in the chat. There's a couple of other questions, and there's one that's come in, and I'll let that one be the second to the last. No, there's more ego pride. I mean, there's lots of ego pride going around in the chat right now. I want to raise a question that Henry Faust is in the room and is raising, and then I'll ask the kind of last question to get us out of here for the night. But Henry's raised a question. You mentioned the BSM gospel choir in one section of your talk. Do you know if anyone has done any research on the importance of institution campus gospel choirs and Christian fellowships in the integration of PWIs? As a member of those groups in the 70s at UNC, I know that they were integral in helping me be comfortable and successful.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's one person, they work on they work more on HBCUs. Yeah, there hasn't been a lot, and they're so important. The Black student movement at UNC, of course, and the gospel choir comes out of that. And that's just fascinating when you go back and you read like Black Ink and you read all of the debates about when they defunded the gospel choir, these questions around the politics of race, the questions of religion. Is it a religious group? Is it a Black group? But that's an amazing question, and that work needs to be done. At the same time that they're forming the gospel choir in UNC at UVA is called, the Black Voices. Black Voices was created in 1971. So when Black students get on historically white colleges, historically white colleges and universities, the second thing they do is they form a gospel choir. They form a BSU or Black Student Alliance. Usually that's the first thing. Then a gospel choir, and usually then you get the Greek letter organizations. But that is critical. And of course, we know one of the most important and best-selling gospel groups of the 1990s, the Sounds of Blackness.
Sounds of
It
Blackness, yeah.
emerged out of, Macalester College, and they were called Black Voices. And so that is, it's something I actually want to work on. And, I've had a chance to actually be in to go to the archives and do a little bit with UNC and the Black, the choirs, because they also, Black colleges and, choirs from Black colleges and white colleges, they came together and actually recorded. There's actually 2 recordings, and one recording was on Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff's The Sounds of Philadelphia. There's an album out. It's hard to find, but you can find it, that features a lot of the choirs from this moment. So that is a great question, and I do think more work needs to be done. I view this formation of the gospel choir as an integral component and a part of the Black Studies movement, but also this larger story about also Black theology. So I try to put all of that in conversation, I think, in the 1970s. I think that's such important work. So thanks for that question.
I want to round us out, of course, thanking you for such wonderful mining, right, of the music that you do, and just really of the forms. Just as a kind of final question, I'd love to hear you just kind of share what you think the implications of gospel music's political evolution are, for the future of culture and social movements, especially in the era of digital media, right? What do you think those connections and possibilities are?
I think there are endless possibilities. I think there are opportunities, but I think there are also struggles. My film is a praise song, but there's a way in which it would probably not be regarded as gospel music, because with it is a message of inclusivity that some people might say does not bring the gospel. And so I think there are endless possibilities. I don't know why there couldn't have been more Everything is Love. I don't know why, I wish my uncle didn't stop with his second album with the Mighty Clouds of Joy. He went on with Candy State, and then if you really listen, it's all the same. But, but when I listen to Rance Allen, when I listen to certain things, I wonder, why couldn't there be more? And then also, as you listen to people that you loved in the 80s who come with a different message in the 90s and in the 2000s, because they're also shaped by these larger developments happening within the larger contemporary Christian music industry. There are endless possibilities. But those of us who have a vision of gospel, we have to begin to also articulate our vision. And hopefully our vision can make some headway. But I think that is also, so I see endless possibilities. I see endless possibilities of sharing. That's why I spend so much time with Jafa and Jatavia Gary. I think there are folks who are doing some interesting things with the gospel, even as they may not identify as of the gospel. And I think that's where it becomes also complicated, but I think we can do the work. We
Hmm.
can do the kind of work, and for me, it's extending. That film is about extending the work, the critical work that I think Walter Hawkins did in his lifetime. And at the same time, I think we have to be very clear that there will be fights about definition. You know, is this gospel? And so by extension, sometimes when you have those fights, it becomes, will that particular brand of gospel music also get on the airwaves? And I'm not talking about crossing over, I'm talking about getting on the gospel airwaves.
Yeah.
You know, I'm talking about doing the kind of work that, say, the Sounds of Blackness was that they were doing in the 1980s and the 1990s. You know, does it get beyond optimistic on the gospel airwaves? You know, so it is about doing the work, claiming a tradition, and redefining the future. And that is the battle. But I am pretty sure that there are forms of gospel music now and styles of gospel music now that are accepted as forms and styles of gospel music that someone in the 30s or the 50s or the 70s would have been like, what is this? And so I find hope,
Hmm.
though I'm cautious with that reality. But we have to fight for it, you know. And that's what, just to say, that's what people like Shirley Caesar understood. Sometimes you got to really read deep into even those critiques of contemporary gospel music. Sometimes the critique is that in transforming the form, you're going to lose some spirit power.
Hmm.
And so sometimes those conversations that they're having about form are conversations about content and possibility, you know? And so I gotta have the faith because I know that there is something within me and the music that matters deeply.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, thank you for this generative offering. There's a really great question in the chat. I just want to raise it. Just if you could just answer, somebody just pop this question in about the correlation between Black church aesthetics, queer culture, cultural performance. Just very quickly, are there particular denominations that have been especially generative to those intersections?
Yes. There have been particular dominations. There is, I mean, I think there's definitely a Kojic influence on gospel music. Coming from a Baptist tradition, though, sometimes I think the Baptist tradition is overlooked. My uncle was St. Matthew's Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Florida. There are definitely traditions. There is I call it like there's a Black Baptist Bethel Baptist institutional sound, you know. So when I think of like even the kind of the voice, when I think about people, if you go from Aretha Franklin to say Whitney Houston, so yes, I think when you think about all those different kinds and strands, and that is a wonderful, wonderful question. I do think that there are certain traditions that inform that. And I think one of the things we have to be very careful of in the scholarship of gospel music is that our ears aren't just attuned to one style because that is what we kind of we grew up on. So also, like, I mean, I know we gotta be quick, but how would you think about someone like an Andre Crouch?
Hmm.
Like, what denomination, and we know his genealogy is Kojic, right?
Yeah.
But what denomination would you put on him? You know, and so it becomes very complicated. You got to know all of those different strains. You have to know all of those encounters. I mean, it's very interesting after the Grammys, you know, when, you know, always CeCe Winans just sweep them all. And there were some interesting comments from folks who felt like she didn't deserve it. And then there were these comments that she was not gospel, that she was contemporary Christian music. And at the same time, she's an heir of Andre Crouch. You know, you listen to her 1995 Alone in His Presence, and Andre Crouch will just begin to emerge from the speakers.
Wow.
You know, how do you think about that? What denomination do you put on that sound? you know, and that's when it becomes very complicated. But what happens is when people don't know the genealogy, you know, and Andre Crouch could play with it, because even if you listen to a song like Soon and Very Soon, there's a lot going on. And then at that end, he say, you know, when he brings in his father's church to sing the background, it's like, oh, yeah, he can give you the blood. He can give you Soon and Very Soon. He can give you We Are Not Ashamed. All of these things, right? How do you wrestle that? How do you wrestle with a sound of folks who from Detroit, but also had their training at PTL? What? So yeah, I think it's very, very complicated and very important. But that's a great question, and that's the thing. Thank you for that question, because I think it's the thing that I struggled with a lot in the book. And that's where I think my weaknesses and my shortcomings in terms of really religious studies were illuminated and apparent. But that's a great question, and I'm appreciative of it. And I'm working on this thing right now, this essay on CeCe Winans, because it's the 30th anniversary this year of Alone in His Presence, her first solo album. And I'm just trying to think about a lot of different conversations about race, politics, religion, denomination in that piece that, you know. So thank you. Thanks for the question, and thanks for the generosity. And thank you, Dr. Roan, and thank you, you know, Professor Clegg, and just thank you, and thank you, Dr. Mcneil, for being a presence and an ever-present footnote. I am so appreciative of you, Dr. Mcneil. Your name, I first heard your name when I was an undergraduate at Temple University in an African-American Religious Studies class taught by Betty Collier Thomas. And so thank you for your scholarly example. And it's been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. I would be remiss for students, UNC students who are on the webinar. The CLE credit we'll put the QR code up in just a second. And if you have any issues getting it, you can always email us at stonecenter@unc.edu. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Dr. Mcneil, for your presence, and to all of you. Happy Black History Month, and we'll see you again soon. All right, most excellent. I see we only got a couple people left.
Okay.
Other than us. Hey, Dr. Mcneil, I don't know if you can hear us. We're just saying hello, sending you love.
All right. So I need you to do me a favor.
Yes.
I probably showed more of that film than I was supposed to. If you could
Okay.
just, when you all, are you gonna put it up?
We can, but we can also edit. We can
Oh,
also.
no, that's what yeah, and when you put up the webinar, could you cut the film out?
Sure.
I'm gonna get in trouble. All right.